David Duda is the CEO of A. Duda and Sons, which is one of Florida's largest private employers. And he has got a great story to share about Blue Ocean. His company actually executed this, which is really cool. Love the simplicity of the ideas that have been talked about today. He's going to show it on a granular level how his company approaches. So please welcome David.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I do know some people in the audience here. Ray Watson happens to be one of my next door neighbors. I also went to high school with this big tall fella in the middle here, Steve Kreitz. So it is a small world after all. So I was going to start a little bit with you in case anybody was not aware of what our company is or what it does. What the heck is Duda as a company? Well, we were founded in 1926 out in Oviedo as a celery farming company by my great-grandfather, Andrew Duda, and his three sons. Today, we've grown from a company that started with a 40-acre farm that could be plowed with one mule to a company that's $500 million in revenue annually, and we've got four primary lines of business now. First of all, we're still in the fresh fruit and vegetable business, which is what we started with, our legacy company. But we've added other aspects of agriculture, which I'll explain to you in a little bit. We have become a vertically integrated real estate developer and a home builder, and we also have diversified ourselves over the years to own commercial real estate. So we're a landlord as well. These are all the things that we tried to do to try to help diversify our business and survive all the ups and downs of the economy and agriculture. We are, you could say, we're in the business of providing two of the most basic of human needs, food and shelter. The third one is clothing, and I don't think we're going there. All right, so my particular background, I've been the president of the company since 2010. I am the first of the fourth generation of Dudas to actually manage the business. There were 45 kids in my generation of the family, in the Duda family, so it's not like it was just 2 or 3 of us to choose from. There are quite a few. So we have more than 25 family members that are working in the business today across the company. So family and business don't always mix, but when it does, it's a beautiful thing. My own background, I previously was various posts, the chief administrative officer, chief financial officer, the controller of the company, director of finance. I actually started out years ago after getting my MBA by working as a banker. You're hearing a common theme here. I was working for what's now Bank of America and did that for several years. So I've got a little bit of those scar tissues as well as some of the other folks in the room that way too. Now, Duda Farm Fresh Foods is our fresh fruit and vegetable company. That's what we started with many years ago and is still the biggest part of our business, about 60% of our revenues that way. Celery is still our biggest crop. It's our legacy crop. And this stuff here, if you've ever eaten celery before, the chances are you've eaten some of ours because we have more than a 35% national market share at the retail grocery level. There are 3 really big celery producers and a bunch of small ones, so chances are you've eaten some of ours. We have shipping points still in Florida, but our biggest shipping points for our vegetables and fruit is really now in California and Arizona. So we've had to migrate. We've had to actually pick up and follow to where the market is, to wherever is the best place to produce whatever it is. Or we would have, like Blockbuster, gone dark if we'd have just stuck to trying to farm celery in Central Florida, and that ship would have sunk a long time ago. Here's a fun fact for you. How much celery do we grow in a year? If you took all the celery stalks that we grow and you laid them end to end, they would go around the earth more than twice. Wow. The earth's about 25,000 miles in circumference, so that's more than 50,000 miles of celery that we grow in a year. Celery. Who the heck eats it? I'm sure glad somebody does, though, right?
How many acres is that?
I showed it. I can't really tell you how many acres. I'm trying to think of how many that is. We probably get about 1,500 cartons of celery out of an acre and about 30 stalks of celery in a carton. I can't do the math that quick on my head. We'll leave it at that.
So David, we've always heard that celery is a negative calorie thing because it takes more calories to burn and to actually do. How much energy can we generate for, 2 trips around the earth?
An old wives' tale. There's no such thing as a negative calorie food, but just the same. Some of the other things that we do, radishes, we just seem to specialize in things that aren't exactly center of the plate for people. Radishes, sweet corn, lettuce, various kinds of lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower, and fresh cut celery sticks now too. We've got a high market share in that. Some of our biggest customers are Walmart, Costco, and Publix. So you can find these things right there. The second part of our business is Duda Ranches, which is an agriculture and land management company. The biggest part of that is oranges. We have more than 10,000 acres of orange groves, so we grow quite a few of those. We also have about 5,000 acres of sugar cane that we grow here in Florida, about 3,500 cows, so we're a cattle rancher as well, and we grow about 3,000 acres of sod or turf grass on top of that. Sod is an interesting business. I'll give you a little bit of background on that as we go along. What I will point out for you for the time being, I don't know if you can see it very well, but these are pallets of sod in the field, and you can see the remnants of little strips of sod in between them. So when you come through and cut the sod, you leave little bits of ribbons, we call them, in between. That's what grows back in about a year's time and becomes the next field of sod. Now, how you manage that is something we've had to perfect or get better at over the years in dealing with recessions. I'll get to that in a bit. And there's an old saying that if you're a Florida farmer for long enough, you become a real estate developer. It worked for us. It certainly did. The Vieira Company is our vertically integrated real estate development arm, and we're developing a master planned community in Brevard County between Cocoa Beach and Melbourne. It's right on I-95. It's called Vieira. It's being developed from an old cattle ranch that the family bought. This is fun too. It was more than 40,000 acres that was bought in the 1940s. You will cry when you hear that the first 25,000 acres of it were bought for $2.25 an acre. Wow. That's about $30 an acre in today's dollars. But at the time, as they said, the place was so wet that a cow couldn't find a dry place to lay down. So they had to, it was cheap for a reason, and there was no interstate system. Nobody knew there was going to be an interstate system. So the new family decided on the name Vieira because it's a Slovak word. It's a word that means faith in the Slovak language. My great-grandfather had come over from Slovakia, what was the eastern part of Czechoslovakia, in 1909 to the United States, and so that's how we wanted to pay tribute to him. We started developing real estate in 1989 in Vieira. We now have more than 20,000 residents as part of this community, and we've got entitlements for another 40,000 more. So we've got a ways to go with that. Most of you are familiar with large community developments like the Villages. The most successful master planned community in Florida. They're just a legend with that. But believe it or not, Vieira is actually in the top 25 of the master planned communities in the whole United States in terms of annual sales. So it's been quite a success to go along with that. And we added a home building company, the vertical construction component, back in 2005. We call that Vieira Builders. And we're finishing our fiscal year. We're up 1st of September to end of August year. We're going to have more than 320 homes that we're selling, that we've built and sold through Vieira Builders this year as well. And the last of the things that we've done to innovate or to diversify ourselves has been commercial real estate. We actually own more than 1 million square feet of commercial real estate space, more than 64 different properties in 16 different states. So we're not all in one spot either. More than $200 million worth of commercial real estate portfolio. Most of these are single tenant, and they're what we call triple net properties, which means that the tenant's not only responsible for the rent, but they also pay for the maintenance, the property insurance, and the taxes, the real estate taxes. That's what the phrase triple net means to the commercial real estate world. This has just been a great diversification tactic because whether it rains or whether it doesn't, whether the price of this or that is up or down, your tenant makes his payments. So some of our bigger tenants that we have are Walgreens, Flowers Foods, Dollar General, CVS, Advance Auto Parts, Ruby Tuesdays, and Food Lion. So it's just kind of an eclectic mix of things, but there's some science behind all of that. So this is what you really wanted to hear, I guess, is so that's all fun, but what have you learned from being in business as a company for more than 90 years, and what lessons can you apply that are useful as you look forward to economic cycles and stuff? I'll start with some lessons from agriculture, and that is number one, agriculture, or let's say the profits from agriculture are cyclical, but food demand is not necessarily related to or correlated with the economic cycle. There are some things that are luxuries, like maybe avocado toast or lattes from Starbucks. Maybe I stopped preaching and started meddling there, I'm not sure. But some things are luxuries, but some are not. You have to eat healthy, whether there's a recession going on or not. So profits can be up, actually, during a recession, and they can be down even when the economy is going great. We're actually experiencing that right now because certain of our commodities are oversupplied at the moment, even though the economy is going great and people are all employed. They're not necessarily correlated. There are a few of our agricultural products, though, that are correlated to the business or economic cycle. And I mentioned sod earlier. That's one of them. And it's almost, really, it's a building material. Because if you don't have a sodded yard, if you don't have grass in your yard, you can't get a certificate of occupancy to sell a house. So sod is like shingles or anything else. It's a building material in many respects. And over a number of real estate cycles, over the many years we've been in the sod business since the 1970s, we've learned that you have to manage your inventories very carefully with sod to try to anticipate when is the economic cycle going to turn, or when do you have too much of it. And so one of the things that you can do is you can, I showed you the ribbons in the field before. One thing you can do if you're thinking that, boy, we're on a declining market, is just solid harvest. Don't leave ribbons. Just take all of the sod out of the field and fallow that piece of ground, or else put something else on it. So sod is an inventory management game, and it's different from some of the other aspects of agriculture for us that we've had to learn about. If you think about it, most of the time when you make a finished product and you put it in a warehouse, sod, though, when it's in the field and it's ready to sell, it's expensive because you have to keep on mowing it, fertilizing it, keeping the bugs out of it. And so the longer it sits, already ready to sell but not able to sell yet, it's just eating you alive. It's costing you money. So you want to, about as fast as you can get it ready where it'll hold together to sell it, that's when you want to harvest it if you can. So you have to manage your supply very carefully. Yes, ma'am.
Me and Oviedo personally, telling me from church, we're always fascinated with what happens to Duda when we get the Lake Duda effect. What does that do to our sod farm there on Commercial Avenue?
We had about 4 inches of rain the other night, and we have a sod field in Oviedo that's about 100 acres or so, that all the water in the city, it seems, flows there, and there's a temporary lake. That's a very small part of our sod business, and in about a week's time, the water gets out of there, and sod can be underwater for a few days, and it doesn't really hurt it much.
We wondered about that.
Yeah. No problem there. All right. Real estate was another area where we had some very distinct lessons that we've had to learn, because real estate, Florida real estate is cyclical, and it has some legendary boom and bust cycles. You know, there's no doubt of that. And there really is no recession-proof strategy to being a real estate developer in the state of Florida. There are some things that work and some things that work better or worse than others, but there's nothing that's recession-proof. One of the things that we learned in the last recession, which was the worst recession since the Great Depression, of course, so there are very distinct lessons from that. One of them was sticking to primary housing. Even during a recession, people do still need to raise their families. They still need a place. A good old-fashioned 4-bedroom house is still a basic need. But luxury homes or second homes, vacation homes or retiree homes, those are the sort of things that are a little more optional. And so the demand for those shuts off the fastest. So if you can stick to the center of the plate with homes that people still need, whether there's a recession or not, you're going to be better than some others. And so we have consciously tried to focus ourselves in that regard. Managing the inventories of finished lots is another thing. When the recession hit in 2008, we had about 800 single-family lots ready to have homes built on them. And that year, I think we sold 28 lots. So it looked like we had a lifetime supply ahead of us at the time. So one of the things you have to figure out is the batches of inventory that you put in place. And so we've consciously done smaller subdivision phases. Steve's nodding his head as an engineer, he knows what I'm talking about here. You don't want to, it's cheaper by the dozen, right? It's always cheaper to go buy your rolls of toilet paper at Costco because you get a year's supply at a time, but on a per roll basis, it's really, really cheap. Except if you lose your job and you need cash and you stare at that mound of toilet paper in your garage all year and say, dang, I wish I hadn't spent all my money on that. So it's the same principle applied to real estate. So we build, instead of building hundreds of subdivision lots at a time and doing all the mass grading and the underground utilities and all that, you do it in a phase of 40 or 50 homes at a time. Now that's not always a profit maximizing strategy, but it is playing defense. When times are good, there's a tendency to want to pull the goalie out of the game, right? Let's all just keep attacking, except then you remember, oh yeah, you can get stuck with all of this and it can hurt you. So that's one of the things that we learned. We also used our own home building company. It was a great, it turned out to have been a great thing to have started that home building company just before the recession, because we were able to build homes on some of these lots that I told you we had 800 of, and it's easier to sell a finished house than it is a raw piece of dirt. No doubt, because you've got something that somebody can immediately move into and you have a different customer for that. So we used our home building company in some cases so we could recover the cash that we had put into the real estate by building a home on it, and then you can turn it over. And in some cases, we even took lots that you could have built a much bigger house on and put smaller homes because the demand was for a smaller home. So some people have got a little house and a great big piece of land around it, bigger than you would normally build necessarily, but that's what it took to work your way out of that kind of a situation. So these are lessons that, that stick with you. Now, recessions are not all bad. There is a silver lining to them, though, as well. And that is that you have sometimes the opportunity that otherwise wouldn't exist. One of the opportunities was to acquire talent. I told you about our home building company. Well, in 2008, just about every home builder in the state was looking for work. And so we were able to hire a lot of high-quality people that today are the core nucleus of the team that we have that's building homes and making profit for us today, because they were available and because we had diversified ourselves enough to be able to hire, and that's what people were looking for, was somebody who didn't cut and run. And home building's great, except when it isn't. They wanted somebody that they could count on would still be employing them at some point in the future. So that worked out well. And gosh, can you find bargains during a recession as well. I think at one point all of the Florida real estate, or all of the developed lots in the state, were selling at 10 cents on the dollar, right after the worst of the recession in 2008. We weren't even sure when the banking system was going to exist anymore as we know it. Land was incredibly cheap, and we in some cases were even able to take a piece of land that we had sold to somebody else when times were good, and we reacquired it for pennies on the dollar and put up our own product on it again. So again, there are opportunities as well as there are threats during a recession. And just in general, some financial things. Remember, I was trained as a banker. It's hard to beat that out of me. I've spent most of my adult life around either being on one side of the lender's table or as the borrower and thinking in those terms. So I heard some of the, I was able to listen in on some of the things Taylor had said earlier, and maybe this is redundant in some cases, but the first principle of investment in any business is diversification. I've mentioned to you that if we were still just a single celery farm in Central Florida, we would have gone dark a long time ago. If we had not diversified ourselves, we would be dead. That's true in your 401k. That's true in a business. You've got to have more than one way to make a profit. You've got to find ways to diversify yourself. We've diversified over the years with geography. We no longer are just in one place in Florida. We've done it with different product lines. We don't just grow celery, we grow lettuce, we grow radishes, we grow oranges, we grow lots of other things. So we've done it in lots of different ways, even different industries. There is a temptation to expand, and Taylor was talking about it. Boy, when times are good, you want to if a little's good, a lot's better. Let me take the next risk. Let's see how much bigger I can get, because somebody's probably whispering in your ear and saying, gosh, we made X this year. We could have made 2X if we were only bigger. So somebody's always nipping on you to say, why aren't we bigger? We missed a bet. We should have expanded. That may be true, but you do have to watch out. While times are good, you should be taking the opportunity to make sure that you are as secure as you can be for the next potential downturn that comes around. That includes things like paying down your debt, reducing your fixed expenses, making sure that you've got capacity in your balance sheet. Again, because you may want to go bargain hunting when times are not so good. So it's a good time to make sure that you get your house in order. Now, land is one of the most illiquid things you can ever own. And boy, is that a painful lesson during a recession. So you have to be especially careful if you're close to the real estate cycle that way. And real estate developers, I've known a lot of them. I am one in that respect. People who own real estate tend to think in terms of asset value. They tend to think in terms of collateral or loan to value. Well, I think my land is worth this. Surely a bank will lend me some fraction of that. Banks, on the other hand, think of three things in this order: cash flow, and cash flow. And you heard Taylor talking about that. What they're concerned about is, can you pay your bills later on? The bank doesn't want to take back the collateral. They never do. But they take collateral because that's smart. That's their safety net. But they're hoping, like you are, that this really acts like it's an unsecured loan. Look, they never really needed the collateral, that you were going to pay them back. So that's the way that they think, and it helps to put yourself in their shoes to really be prepared for that, and to avoid ever having to have that painful conversation with the special assets a part of the bank. That's never any fun. So one thing I preach all the time within our organization, because of the lessons I've learned as an adult going through it, is that the cost of credit is not nearly as important to you as making sure you can get to it when you really need it. I don't mind paying a little bit more to somebody, whether it's a community bank or whether it's someone else. It's not necessarily the cheapest deal in town. The most important thing is knowing that you can still access it when you really need it. We've all heard the adage, the banker's the kind of fellow who will lend you an umbrella when it's sunny and want it back at the first sign of rain. And your job is to figure out, while times are good, who's going to behave that way or who's going to stick with you. You have to pick your financial partners really, really carefully, build up your relationship with them, build up the trust, and make sure that you're talking to the right people. And there are lots of cautionary tales with that, but that's just in general. The way that you can survive multiple cycles is you have to pick your financial partners carefully as you go along. And you have to look at how they've behaved in the past, how they're behaving with you while times are good. Anybody can lend you money when you never lose money. But who's going to treat you well or still give you the time of day when it isn't that way? So those are some of the lessons of having been in the agriculture and real estate side of things. I'd be happy to answer any questions. It's been a privilege to be with you, so we'll get started.
Do you have specific growth discipline, how fast you'll grow, or what you use, or a percentage you use? Is there, to just keep yourself in the game?
I'm trying to think of how to answer your question in those terms. I have rarely seen us turn down an investment opportunity that had a good internal rate of return or net present value to it, but you can imagine that as diversified as we are in so many different lines of business, you can't say yes to everything. So we do have to try to prioritize, and that alone is one of the ways to do it. We do also benchmark ourselves against, we're big enough to benchmark ourselves against some public companies. Nope, there isn't a public company out there that's exactly like ours, but there are some that have some aspects of it, and we have an annual valuation every year because of estate planning and other kinds of issues for the family aspect of it. So we know who really we resemble that's out there in the public arena, and we benchmark our return on assets to see how we're doing at the aggregate level. Are we actually performing as well as these other companies are? Yes, sir, in the back.
David, I've been in Florida since 1946. I'm sorry to admit. Actually, my dad used to hunt and fish in what's now Disney But Duda is a company that I've never heard anything bad about. So I think that's a wonderful accolade for you folks. I would guess if you would address a little bit about how incredibly valuable relationships are with your vendors, your bankers, the people you do business with, in good times or bad times. How does that help you?
A couple of expressions come to mind. Number one, everybody dies famous in a small town, and we started out in a small town and out in Oviedo, so everybody remembers everything about you. There's no doubt of that. And friends come and go, but enemies accumulate. So you have to be really careful about that as well. Paying attention to reputation, to having integrity in your conduct, to being ethical, to treating employees well, all of these things are things that we do because it's part of who we are as a family. We believe in these things, but I will tell you, they also do have a benefit from a doing business standpoint. That it's been very beneficial to us. We have a lot of very long-term employees that have stuck with us a long time, and that's very valuable. But doing what you say and meaning what you say and doing business in the community is important, and it really does pay off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, David, I found it coincidental when we were talking about you coming and talking. I said I was going to give a talk on Blue Ocean strategy. And you said, oh, by the way, 5 or 6 years ago, my whole leadership team got involved with the book and used it. Why don't you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, quite a few of us in the senior management team, there's about 8 or 9 that make up our really senior most executive team. Most of us had read the Blue Ocean strategy book and could probably have quoted a fair number of the examples that Ray had pulled from the book. What was instructive to us was thinking about what can we do where other people can't? What advantages do we have other people can't follow? Celery was one of the 3 things. We did 3 things. We called them the 3 C's that were celery, citrus development, and community development, because we thought we had natural advantages that nobody else could do. We had natural advantages in celery because we actually grow our own proprietary seeds. We've done our own breeding of celery for years and years. We don't buy anybody else's seed. We grow our own, and nobody else uses ours. So we think we have natural advantages over the rest of the world in terms of how our varieties behave and how they do when there are bad elements of weather or otherwise. Citrus was a big opportunity for us because we have not been as badly affected as a lot of other people in the state with citrus greening. We're fortunate that we have some isolation with the land that we grow oranges on that doesn't. And we have good neighbors. What little bit of citrus there is that's nearby us, they're good neighbors and do a good job of taking care of their trees to keep the pest out of there as well. So we thought we had some unique advantages. And then real estate is like the ultimate in terms of uniqueness. I mean, land is all about location, location, location. Somebody can't duplicate your location. They may can build the exact same house on a different piece of land, but that land is not located right where you are. So we had some natural transportation and other advantages with developing Vieira that nobody else could have based on where it was right along the interstate. And so we decided we were going to press our advantages in those areas. So again, Blue Ocean kind of helped us to figure out, now that it's time to start trying to expand and grow again, where should we go and what should we do? The concept helped us quite a bit in trying to decide what should we be emphasizing.
You talked earlier about just the diversification process. So right now, if you look at your business and maybe there's one line that you're really invested in, how could you explore other opportunities? So can you share with the group and with me as well what it looks like when you decided to open up your building diversification or different crops? Who's involved in that decision-making process? How does it not disrupt your normal business? What does that decision-making look like?
I had flipped through the book that you have, and I saw that somebody had noted that you start with a bullet rather than a cannon shot,
Yeah.
and I think that's very true. You usually start in some way by testing out the market with something. You don't suddenly decide to try something and bet the farm on it. So if we wanted to try growing a new crop of something, we would probably start with a test plot, or we would grow a few acres to see whether there's a market for it, or If we think we want to try growing, beginning, and we've done this recently, trying to see if we could grow celery outside of Florida. We went and looked at Georgia, we've looked at North Carolina. Well, you don't plant hundreds or thousands of acres of whatever it is because you can fall right on your nose with that in a big way. You start with a smaller batch or a test of something and see whether that's going to work. And if it does, that's when, like your folder says here, that's when you decide whether or not you really, how big of a cannon do you want to fire at it now? Well, you've proved it out. It makes sense. Yes?
David, you have how many employees today?
We have about 700 full-time employees, and about 300 of those roughly are salaried. The rest are full-time hourly workers for us.
Just a question on how your human resources team has utilized technology and other tools to support efficiency and compliance and communication throughout the organization. Just curious.
There is a natural tendency in a recession to start throwing things overboard that you think you can get by with without doing for a while. Training and employee development is one of those programs that often is the first thing that people say, the wheels won't fall off if we don't send our people to training for a year. And that happened to us too, like a lot of companies. And so I've had to work at trying to consciously go back and rebuild and put emphasis on human resources for us to try to beef back up and get where we ought to be with employee development since the recession. So that for us involved bringing in some talented people. We've gone back and rehired a full-time trainer or organizer of employee development programs. We've consciously invested in better payroll management and better human resource management software, because you only get so far with green eye shade type of things. So we've invested in that to where we even have, employees can access with a mobile app now. They can now see when their check or their pay has hit their bank account, those sorts of things, that they can do some basic management of things that way. So again, it was something we had to consciously remember that we need to be putting emphasis on this. And I had this conversation with Ray that I'm a financial capital guy from way back when. I've always been about the proper management of financial capital. But if you're really doing it right as a business, you're going to place as much emphasis on human capital as you do on financial capital, because you can't get anything important done without teams of people. It just can't be done. Individual effort is great, individual achievement is great, but if you want something really big done, it takes a team of people to do it. And if you don't place emphasis on developing your people so they can work effectively in teams, then you're not going to get a lot done, or you're going to be disappointed in what happens. So I've had to learn an old dog learning new tricks as I've gotten older here with that, and being responsible instead of being the CFO of the company, but now being the CEO. Don't forget, I have to think in terms of operations now and about human capital instead of just thinking about the financial side of things. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to piggyback on that. One of the thoughts that keeps popping into my head this morning across all the activities and the speakers that have presented is that within an organization, whether it's big or small, growth and challenging times, okay, so not opposite of growth, causes just as much tension on both. So when things are going really well, there's a lot of tension in the office to make sure it stays that way and all the charts are going up, right? But when the company is struggling and sales are not coming through, or whatever other internal issues might be happening, there's just as much tension. So to you, with a company of 700, and to maybe some of the other speakers in the room, how do you continue to nurture and foster a culture of positivity during those moments of tension?
You've pointed out a really important part, and that is some people find it really easy to manage, or easier to manage, let's say, during a crisis. Because crisis management is great because it makes your decisions for you. What do I need to be focusing on? Obviously the bear that's right behind me, that's going to bite me in the behind if I don't stay ahead of him. Crisis management is easier for people, and some people find it necessary to create a crisis, even if there isn't one, just so they know what to do every day. I think we all know people that way. I won't name them, but everybody knows somebody that way. The hardest part of management really is when times are good, is how you respond. What do you do next when you've had success? What's your next big thing? It's great to have set a goal and achieved it, but okay, now what do I do? And what's the next big thing? And that actually is the hardest part of it. And to some degree, I would say that in our organization right now, we're struggling with that a little bit, of trying to figure out what's our next big thing. Of course, we were, and then came the hurricane last year, and that created the crisis that told us what we needed to do for the next 12 months. But hopefully we'll get back on the track of, again, thinking, what do you do? Managing success is harder than managing failure in some respects. It's a different kind of challenge, that's for sure. There's no doubt of that.
Are you going to go, or are you looking at going into the medical marijuana business?
We are not. We have decided part of the mission statement of our company is that we grow healthy food products. So we've decided as a company founded in, as we are on Christian principles, that's something that we could do, but we're not going to do, because we've just decided that's something we're going to say no to. Yes?
I'm going to put you on the spot. In the last 10 years, where did the company fall? Was there any spot that really you wanted it to work and it didn't? And what has that done to help you get to?
Oh. Managing technology has been a challenge, and I think that's a universal thing for a lot of people. We still have aspects of our business that are running on a mainframe computer with software that we programmed ourselves beginning in the 1970s. One of the most painful things that we have had to do was to finally try to migrate that to a more modern technology. We decided to go with Microsoft Dynamics AX as our platform, to go from being mainframe-based to server-based with that. I didn't add, but the first job I actually had in the business once upon a time when I came back from being banking was I was dropped unceremoniously into our IT department and said, here, learn this. No one else in the family wants to know anything about it. So I have some experience with that, and I have had some responsibility for our IT department at one time or another, more or less over the last 30 years. It's painful, it's difficult to do it, and I wish I could say we had done a better job of it, but we have gotten there. For our largest line of business, the most complex thing we do is our fresh fruit and vegetable business. It's dealing with the large customers and such. When Walmart tells you how they're going to invoice you or how they want it to be, you don't get much opportunity to argue with them, even if you want to say, well, this is the way we want to do it, not if you want to sell it to me. So we oftentimes are more or less dictated to about how we have to do things from a technology department with a lot of our customers in that line of business. A lot of moving parts in it, and that's the most difficult part, but we've gotten over the hump now with that one. So we've made progress with that. But I wish I could say we have done a better job of the project management of that. It's taken longer and cost more than we thought it would. Does that sound unusual to anybody who's ever done a technology upgrade? Because it is human nature, it is very difficult to manage that kind of a program or a transition. If I had it to do over again, I certainly wouldn't say that we wouldn't go through the journey. We still needed to, and I'm glad that we did, and we've been successful with it. I wish we had been a bit more efficient about how we managed it as we went. But we got done what we needed to get done, for sure. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Please eat more celery.